After running the script to detect silences, an important step is going to be to correct the text grid output of that script. So the script works pretty well, um, but there are going to be a few general types of problems that need to be corrected. So to correct that text grid, you'll want to open up and you'll do these individually by each participant, but you'll want to go and select the WAV file and also the corresponding text grid that's the output of the detect silence, and that's all going to be here in this word list folder. So we will load those up in prot, just double select them and then drop them into prot, and then select both of those here and view and edit. And now we have the waveform up here, and the waveform, basically these lines right here are just representations of the sound. So it's the amplitude. So whenever the sound is louder, these lines are going to be higher, and whenever it's quieter, the lines are going to be lower. So there's going to be, I guess, three major types of issues that need to be corrected. The first one, well, let me step back and say what the goals are. So we can go here to this word list correction notes, and here's a list of some tips and also some goals. So the goal that we're doing in trying to correct this output is we want to mark the silent intervals, or the intervals we're not interested in, with 3 X's in lowercase. So that should, ideally, that should already be done by the detect silent script. The other thing that we want is to select each individual word in the word list and have that be in an unlabeled, in a blank interval. So there's nothing written down here. And we want to only select the word with a small buffer on each side, maybe a tenth of a second on each side, just to make sure we get the whole word in without clipping any off. And then we also want to make sure that we select the entire word. So sometimes at the beginning, especially if it's a fricative, fricatives are a bit quieter than vowels are. So we may need to move the first boundary a little bit earlier. And sometimes at the end of a word, a final stop won't be released until a little bit later. So we'll see some examples of that. Here's some shortcuts to use, both to zoom in and to zoom out and to jump between the intervals. And you'll probably mostly use, to make these judgments, you'll probably mostly use the waveform, but you should also listen to the sounds, especially if there's any ambiguity. So let's move on to looking at some of the major issues. So here, well, okay, the first major issue that you may come across that's not shown in this example is that the detect silent script just did a horrible job, and it's calling things silent that aren't silent, and it's marking things as audible where there's no sound. In that case, go back to the detect silent script and adjust the minimum level for the decibels. So the default is 30, so maybe adjust it up to 35 or adjust it down to 25 and just see how that goes. Okay, so the first major issue is that everything's all wrong. But assuming you have a pretty clean looking output, kind of like this one, you might come across another minor issue. So here's an example where we have these 3 peaks right here, and they're all labeled as a single interval. So this can't possibly be true because we're looking at single word list items. Okay, so something's wrong with this. So let's listen to the whole thing and see what's going on. Again, the screen capture software doesn't let me play these sounds so that you can hear them. So I'll just let you know what I'm listening to. So I'll hit tab while this is selected and I can hear the whole thing. All right, my volume was turned down, so I couldn't hear it either. All right, what happened here is this was a microphone creak, so this is the beginning of the recording. It's kind of common for people to adjust themselves, get comfortable when they start a word list. So this is just a creak for the microphone. We don't need that. We can cut that off. In fact, we are going to zoom in a little bit, so I'll do on a Mac Command N. Okay, so that's what microphone creak looks like. This is an actual word right here. This is shot. And so we're going to pull this in. Zoom out a little bit. Okay, so I can select this boundary and just slide that in. And again, I have a little buffer there before shot starts. The next issue here is this is the word hood. And the reason that this wasn't selected is because this time interval here wasn't long enough. The script has a default time between noises for it to put a silence. So we'll go ahead and put a boundary here to mark the end of shot. And on a Mac, I'm going to do Command 1, and that puts a boundary down there. What you can also do to add a boundary, and we'll actually do this over here for hood. So again, there's the beginning of that kind of higher amplitude right there for hood. So I'm going to set a boundary a little bit before that. And so another way to set a boundary is to go up here to boundary and add on tier 1. So tier 1, this is the first tier. It's possible to have more tiers, 1, 2, 3, etc. All right, so here is hood, and I can listen to it. That's actually shot. And then here's hood. Great. So now this part here is silent, and we need to manually add that code for silent. All right. So now what I'm going to do is zoom into this one. I'm going to do Command N, and then I'll do Command O to zoom out and give me a little context there. And I can hold down Option and click the right arrow button, and that jumps forward by each interval. So we'll do that. Okay, so here's one issue that you may come across, is that this boundary is a little bit close to that increased amplitude part. So let me listen to it. So this is the word psych. I'm just going to go through and bump that out a little bit so that we have all of it. And then the end looks pretty good too. Okay, that one looks good. That's good. So here's a word that it looks a little bit like that first word that we saw, where there's these 3 major parts here, but this is probably a polysyllabic word, and we'll listen to it. So this is gigantic. So it's multiple syllables, multiple vowels in there. Vowels are going to be louder than consonants. We will extend that out a little bit because there's some higher amplitude there. It's kind of hard to tell exactly when it ends, which is why we put in the buffer. This kind of goes down into a wedge or a cone, but I can listen to it and hear that it's all in there. This is actually the person exhaling at the end. They're saying gigantic. Pretty good. Here's another one that we'll kind of bump out there at the end. That one out too, just a little bit. It's probably not necessary, but it's nice to go ahead and make sure you have the whole word in there. What's going on here? Word rock. This part right here is just that that closure for the stop consonant and then the release. All right, so here's one issue where there's probably stop closure here and then the release, and it actually gets cut off right before the release. So let's listen to what this word is. So all I heard there was sin, and I'm going to bump that up there a little bit. And I'm going to drag this out, so there's an extra consonant in there. So what is this word? So this is sense. So she produced it like an affricate. All right, well, I think you get the idea. You'll just go through all of these recordings, make sure that that you're selecting only the word and that there's only one silent interval in between each word. And after you've gone through the entire recording, you should have this number right here. It's 260 right now. After you finish going through it, it should be 255. Now, to save this file, you'll go up here to File, and then Save TextGrid as File. And you'll automatically have the name of the text grid up here, but we want to have a tag on this to make sure we know which version it is. So we'll do an underscore and then corrected. We can save that. And now when we go back here to this word list file, we see that this is our word list corrected.